Hey, welcome in everyone to the realm of history here. We've got a little review session for chapter 10. I'm going to hit you with a little new intro here. Give me 1 second. Little old school action back when I was your age, sophomore year. Hopefully, the volleyball players are back. I know that I think they won. I think the game was over. I saw some posting, something like that. So hopefully they're able to join in with us. But I've got a couple things planned for you tonight, making sure that we get through this in an efficient way. Really, I'm running a little bit behind. I wanted to watch the Dancing with the Stars. It was Britney Spears night. I'm just kidding, but I know that my kids were watching that, so I thought I'd throw that in there. Okay, so what we're going to start with tonight, here's the live agenda for what we're going to be doing. We're going to go over a couple pieces of advice for key terms, of course, a couple pieces of advice for studying the key figures. We'll have some AP prep and advice there. I've got some important maps and charts that I'll screen share with you to go over. And then we'll, of course, get into some question and answer time to answer any of those big picture questions that you have. And then, like always, I'll close out with some of my final pieces of advice for you. Okay, let's start with a little talk on the key terms. I'm not going to be really going over any specific key terms tonight. What I want to say is a key suggestion, though. What I want you to do is study the definitions for the key terms from your outline notes. Really, what I do is when I make those outlines, I keep into consideration the quiz questions. So I think what you need to really take into account is that the verbiage is going to be similar to what I say in the lectures. And so I think that's a really big piece of advice for you getting ready for those key terms, those key concepts, and of course, those key figures that are on the left-hand column of your review sheet. As for the key figures, a little bit different. I added some things today that you aren't responsible for on the actual assignment portion. So those key figures being like Nasr, alDin, alTusi, the female poet, Aisha, alba, Inaya, those individuals, Ibn Khaldun, those individuals, you'll need to reference not only what we talked about in class, but also the AMSCO reading. And then I did make a video for you on YouTube. It's my most recent video prior to this one, which I think really would help you getting ready for understanding the AP concepts for this chapter. Now, that's what I really wanted to jump into next. I wanted to give you some quick pointers on the AP preparation. So I'm going to pull that up real quick and we'll go over that, a couple of pointers for you. The first prompt is actually based on Muhammad's reforms that helped women. In the reading for AMSCO, it talked about some of the reforms that he made that helped raise or give women a little bit more of those key rights. And so I would say focus on studying AMSCO, the reading for topic 1.2, and in conjunction with that video that I'm referencing, I think that would really cover you and get you ready for the first set of MCQ questions tomorrow. The second prompt that you're going to have questions about is going to be focused on the city of Baghdad. We know that the city of Baghdad under the Abbasids became the capital of the Islamic world. And so what those questions that are going to come off of that prompt are going to be focused on would be the development of Baghdad as a city under the Abbasid Caliphate or under the Abbasid form of rule. Now, I finalized the AP version. There are only going to be 5 questions. So 5 MCQs. There's 2 prompts. The first prompt, which is about Muhammad's reforms, will have 3 questions related to it. And the second prompt, which is about the city of Baghdad, will have 2 questions. Now, please understand, because there's 5 questions, you know that the AP portion is going to be 10 points. So each question is heavily slated at 2 points each. So if you get 1 question wrong, you're already at an 80%. 2 questions wrong, you're down to a 60. So the challenging portion of the AP content is going to be based on, of course, it's challenging enough already, but now the points are going to be 2 points each. So you really don't have much margin for error. I'd say if you get one wrong, you still got a B. But if you get two wrong, you're in really bad shape. So make sure that you're studying the information I'm giving you in the prompts and using that information to help guide you. Okay, now in for a bit of the important maps and charts from the textbook, which I think are going to really help you get ready for certain questions in the multiple choice and matching and also in the short answer. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you just 1 second. Give me a moment here, and I will pull this up, and you're going to see basically our textbook, our World History Patterns of Interaction, in just one moment, and that is coming now. So this is probably the most important chart right here. This one talks about the differences between the Sunni and the Shia. What a great possibility for, of course, a short answer question. I'm going to zoom in on that for you. But this chart right here, it's actually found in your textbook. If you want to reference it, it's on page 271. Okay, you can see the page number right there. But this chart talks about the basic differences between the Sunni and the Shia. Remember, I taught you in lesson that the big picture idea is who was the caliph. That was really the number one factor that you needed to know. Who's going to be the caliph? The Sunni, they don't really care who the caliph is, as long as the caliph follows the Sunnah or Muhammad's example. The Shia, they believe that all of the caliphs need to be bloodline relatives of Muhammad. And so they believe that Ali, the fourth rightly guided caliph, should have been the first caliph because he's a bloodline descendant as Muhammad's son-in-law and also Muhammad's cousin. Now, the Sunni claim that the Shia have distorted the meanings of the Quran, and the Shia claim that the Sunni have distorted the meanings of passages in the Quran. You can see that today, 83% of Muslims are Sunni practitioners, whereas 16% are Shiites or Shia. The other 1% are Sufis, which we also learned about in this chapter. I don't mean to make you dizzy, but I'm going to scroll up. The opening map of this chapter is important. It shows you a very similar map to what we looked at today in the slideshow, and it talks about the span and the spread of Islamic control. You can see that most of the Middle East and modern-day Iran was controlled by the Islamic caliphates. Northern Africa, which is still the case, was very much in control by the Islamic rulers as well. And then southern Spain was really another very big spot for Muslim or Islamic development. Now I'm going to scroll down to another key map that I mentioned on your review sheet. This is about the trade routes. So it talks about over here some of the basic goods that were brought into the Arabian Peninsula: spices, incense, perfumes, precious metals, ivory tusks from both elephants and rhinoceros, and silk, which came from China along the Silk Routes, which are located over here to the right. And then it also shows you where Mecca was located. And then it also shows you in this little purple dot, this purple arrow, the Hajira, the path of Muhammad's travels from Mecca to Medina, where he became a very powerful leader and created an army. This purple area here is an empire called the Sassanid Persian Empire. And then this golden area here is the Byzantine Empire. Those were two of the empires that the early Arabic peoples traded with predominantly. Okay, we talked about the 5 pillars of faith being so important, and I went over those in the notes. Here's another factor right here. This is on page 267. It basically breaks down those 5 pillars of faith and everything that you would really need to know about each one. So you are going to have to list and define these so you can use the notes, which I'm suggesting, or you could also use this page here, 267, to really give you a good understanding of the 5 pillars of faith. Now, as you work your way down, you're going to see another key page, which we already went over the chart. And then you're going to see in section 3, you're going to see where it talks about the role of women, which could help you, okay, on top of the AMSCO reading, answering some of the AP questions. So that is on page 274. There's an insert box about astronomy here, which would help you understand some of the developments at the House of Wisdom. I don't know if you guys know about the 1001 Nights, but what an interesting story. The 1001 Nights is the basis for alAlDin. alAlDin is one of the stories in the 1001 Nights. Basically, what this is about, it's about a king who every single day he marries a new wife and then he has her killed off the next day. So he marries a wife, the next morning he has her killed off until he meets a wife that starts telling him stories, and she leaves him with cliffhangers every night so that he would not kill her, and he wanted to hear the rest of the story the next day. And that's the story of the 1001 Nights, which one of the stories that's in this piece of literature, this fairy tale book, is the alAlDin story with Princess Jasmine, so on and so forth. And Disney just came out with a live action viewing of that here in the past few years. So that's a kind of a cool factor there. Okay, back to the basic idea here. Okay, so we're no longer sharing. Hopefully you can see us back together. And what I want to do now is I want to go to the comments and I want to open up for questions. Okay, we want to open up for questions now. So I'm taking a look at some of the comments. I'm going to scroll up. Okay, we did win in volleyball. Congratulations, girls. Sign of strength. Okay, we got a question by, I think that's Nick. So who is Nasr alDin alTusi? Now, Nasr alDin alTusi, most commonly known for his work at the House of Wisdom on the topics of law, astronomy, mathematics, ethics, which is ethics means doing things properly, morally ethical, doing the right thing, following the proper conduct. Okay, so these are some of the key factors there with Nasr alDin, what he wrote about. But also, one of the things that he's famous for is you have to understand that the Mongols attacked the city of Baghdad, and the House of Wisdom was located in the city of Baghdad. When this attack was taking place, Nasr alDin alTusi is credited with saving 400,000 books from the House of Wisdom, getting them out of the House of Wisdom because the Mongols burned it to the ground. There's only one wall standing today of the former House of Wisdom. And so he really saved a lot of the ancient texts and scrolls that we then translate from Latin or Greek into Arabic and then into English and French and Spanish. And so a lot of what we know is thanks to the Savior by Nasr alDin alTusi, okay, an intellectual scholar that worked at the House of Wisdom. Okay. Question. I imagine the chart that you're looking for is 271, Master Graves. 271 is going to be that chart that you're really looking for right there. Okay, Gabby says, who is Aisha Inuyat? She was a female poet, and she's most well known for writing responses and honoring Muhammad. So she really was well known for her poems that were honoring Muhammad and some of his decisions and some of the practices that he put forth for the Islamic faith. She's basically known as the greatest female poem in the Islamic world up into the 1900s, which would be the 20th century. Okay, yes, another question here. What are the Crusades? Really big picture. Now, we haven't really hit the Crusades as hard as I would like. We're going to get into the Crusades in chapter 13 and 14, which are going to talk about medieval Europe, which are coming up here probably in marking period number 2. But the Crusades are basically holy wars, okay? When a group called the Seljuk Turks took over control of Jerusalem, they no longer allowed Christian pilgrims to come to Jerusalem to worship at the holy sites. They either heavily taxed Christian travelers or they disallowed them by fighting them off with weapons on the outskirts of the city. So the Crusades were wars, series of wars put together by Christian leaders from Europe, some from England, some from France, some from Germany, some from Italy, some from the Byzantine Empire, to fight against the Islamic Turks to reopen access to the holy sites, especially the holy sites in Jerusalem. So that would be what I would really want you to know about the Crusades. Okay, we're making it through our questions. I am here and ready to answer any questions that I can help with at all. So go ahead and fire away. Don't be afraid. I'm with you here to answer those questions. So I'm monitoring the content and I'm monitoring the comments. I don't see anything coming in. I see that there's 53 ballers on. So hopefully you have some questions and I can be of help to you. Okay, here we go. How much should we know about the caliphs? All right, let's pull that one up. Oh, first of all, hold on a second. Let me take this banner down. Yeah, that should help. All right, now back to the comments. We have a question here from the Kirkulator, Master Kirk. How much should we know about the caliphs? Well, in the slideshow today, I sort of mentioned that it's really important to know that the first four caliphs were the rightly guided caliphs, and they were called the rightly guided caliphs because they followed the way of life of Muhammad, which was known as the Sunnah, which was one of the sources of authority. Okay, so what you really want to know about this ideology with the caliphs is that they all knew Muhammad. The first four rightly guided caliphs, they all knew Muhammad. The most important one, I think, to really know a little bit more about is Ali, because Ali, as you saw in the chart, sort of caused this fissure or faction or split between the Sunni and the Shia, or the Sunni and the Shiites, which is still going on today. I mean, it's been thousands of years or over 1,000 years of fighting between these two entities. And it's really over who was the original caliph. Now it's spread into, as we saw in the chart, arguments over how they interpret the Quran and how they should interpret or justify Sharia law. But it originates with Ali not becoming the first caliph. Okay, that would be kind of the bigger picture of one of the caliphs that you would really want to know. Okay, Master Jonathan says, what's Sharia? Sharia law is basically a code of laws or a body of laws that regulates certain things in Islamic society, such as, okay, moral conduct, like what are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? For example, women have to wear the hijab. They have to veil. They have to cover their body in public. That's an example of Sharia law. Men can have 4 wives if they can afford to do so, if they can properly give them food and housing. If they can't, then they're not allowed to have 4 wives. This is all covered in Sharia law. Unfortunately, Sharia law is not like universal. It changes based on geographic location, but it's a code of laws. It regulates moral conduct. It regulates family life. It regulates community life. So those are some of the big stipulations, Jonathan, that you're going to need to know about Sharia law. Here we go. Emma, for the Bedouin ideals, do we need to only know about courage, loyalty to family, and warrior skills, or do we have to go in depth? Okay, what I said in lesson when I taught this would probably be all you need to know. And what I basically said is, hey, when you're living in the desert and survival is very difficult, you need to have courage, because what I said about courage is a lot of times you don't know where the next water source is. Okay, you really just don't know where the next water source is. So sometimes you got to take a chance and traverse out into the middle of the desert and just hope that you find some form of an oasis or some form of vegetation that you can feed your flock of sheep, goat, whatever it is, or even yourself. So that's where you need to have courage. Loyalty to the family was essential to survival for the Bedouins, because you had a very limited amount of people that you traveled with, and you needed to depend on them for safety, comfort, taking care of you if you're sick, bandaging your wounds, helping find food. So loyalty to the family was extremely imperative. That's kind of a misnomer. Imperative, take away the extremely, but it was imperative to their survival. And then finally, warrior skills. What I said about warrior skills is that, hey, because natural resources are scarce in the desert, you have to fight. People had to fight literally hand-to-hand combat over water and over food. So the Bedouins had to practice warrior skills for the essence of survival back in these times, 600s, 500s, 400s AD. Okay. What I would also say, though, Emma, is that you need to take those principles and you need to understand that these ideas, these are the people that eventually gave root to the Islamic people. So Muhammad was a descendant of the Bedouins, and then all of his family, and then all of the people who basically converted to Islam were former Bedouin peoples, okay, that had become civilized. So these cultural practices become ingrained in the society. Okay, good question. Big picture question. What was the Battle of Tours? The Battle of Tours was, of course, a major battle which changed and altered the scope of world history. Because what happened is, as you saw on the map I showed earlier, the Islamic expansion went into Europe, into southern Spain. Then they started to try to expand into France. Okay, so the Islamic region or the Caliphate of the Abbasids and the Umayyads out of Cordoba, Spain, which is al-Andalus, they started to expand northward. Well, there was a Christian army there called the Franks, a Christian entity or civilization, a kingdom called the Franks, and they were led by Charles Martel. So in 732, the two armies met at the battlefield of Tours, which is like midpoint France. All right, it was way up there, actually. You've got the Christian Franks fighting against the Islamic invaders. And the Christian Franks win the battle, luckily, very close battle led by Charles Martel, which alters the scope of world history. Because I'll tell you, had the Muslims won this battle, most historians argue in thesis papers that the rest of Europe would have fallen to the Islamic caliphates. And if this were to happen, it would have been very difficult for Christianity to continue to spread and stay alive, and Catholicism to continue to spread and stay alive. And if you wanted to take it a step further, if you wanted to say, what if, I think you could make this thesis argument that really some of the first travelers to the modern day Americas would most likely have been Islamic practitioners, and that could have altered the scope of the religious practices in our own country. Now, just a little bit of skipping ahead on history here, you do need to understand that our country, the United States of America, was founded by anti-Catholics. People in England that hated Catholics, the Puritans, they wanted to purify the Anglican Church of any Catholic practice. That's why they're called the Puritans, okay? They wanted to get rid of Catholicism. And they were so mad that the leaders in England in the Anglican Church would not get rid of any Catholic entity that they left England and came to the Americas to start a new land and a new entity there. History was altered by the Battle of Tours, but it was also an anti-Catholic foundation of our country in the first place anyway. Great question there, Reese. That's a really big picture point on the Battle of Tours. Sign of strength. Okay, Ryan says, can I go over the Sunnah and also Khadijah? Yes, I can. The Sunnah is a source of authority for Islam, and the Sunnah is basically following the example of Muhammad, okay? So what you want to think about here is that this is really important because people believed in the Islamic world that following the Sunnah or following the example of Muhammad was the best model for how to live your life. And then finally, Khadijah was Muhammad's first wife. She's really influential in the Islamic world for women because she was a woman who was a business owner. And Islamic women could own property and own businesses, which is something that medieval Christian women couldn't even do. All right. Even into the 17 and 1800s in some countries, women could not vote and they could not own property and they could not run businesses. So as much as we think about this or that, Islamic women in some categories had more rights and freedoms than women in other parts of the world. So Khadijah, once again, though, I'm getting a little bit sidetracked. She was Muhammad's first wife. She owned a trading caravan business. She gave him a job. He became a business manager for her, and then he eventually marries her. One of the things that I taught is what she was a lot older than he was. She was about 40 when he was 25. This was not very common back in those times. The reverse was very common back in the 600s, 700s. You'd have older men marrying younger women quite often because they had enough money to do so. And if they were Islamic, they could have up to 4 wives as long as they had enough money to care for them. So that's just a little bit of a different cultural practice and a different historical time frame also. Okay, moving on. Kira, I hope you were paying attention. I just answered this one about the Battle of Tours. I hope you got that. If you didn't, throw me another comment in there and I'll answer it again. No problem. Okay, we got Alexia. Who is Ibn Khaldun and what was his significance? Ibn Khaldun was another key thinker, did some work in the House of Wisdom and other places like Al-Andalus, which is in southern Spain, corresponded with a lot of the key scholars, but history was his focus. A lot of what we know about what was going on in the Middle East and in the Islamic world and in southern Spain and in North Africa during this time period comes from the writings of Ibn Khaldun. And that's really his big significance. He also worked on a subject called sociology. Sociology is a college major that you can take. It's a pretty interesting major. I did not major in sociology. I did not minor in it, but I took 3 or 4 courses in sociology at Oberlin College, which was really an enlightening period of learning for me. Sociology is how people interact with not only each other, but also different topics and genres and how people correspond. Social justice is one of the big factors of sociology. So it's a study of how people interact in certain values, cultures, genres, so on and so forth. So it's something that, hey, if you're interested in that type of thing, you could look up majoring in sociology. That is given a lot of credit to Ibn Khaldun, one of the first sociologists of all time. Pia just answered that one for you right there. You guys had the same question right after each other, so hopefully you were listening into that. Yes, indeed. We have Britney Spears night. Of course. I hope you're watching that and learn some. Yeah, you know, Josh, I think you need to watch Dancing with the Stars, pick up some moves, man. I think that'd be actually beneficial for you. Just saying. Okay. Reese, Sign of Strength. Love it. Yes. I wasn't watching. I was listening. Britney Spears, kind of like, when I was your age. So kind of cool stuff. Okay, the Mamluk. Yes, Jonathan, good question. The Mamluk is something that was talked about extensively in the AMSCO. Here's the deal. The Mamluk are some pretty bad dudes. All right. If you watch Game of Thrones, they're like the bad dudes in Game of Thrones. All right. They're like these guys that they're hired to fight. Okay. They're from Central Asia and they're Turks, and in Central Asia, it's kind of like the desert because there's grasslands and people are fighting over the best resources all the time. Mongols, Huns, Turks, Seljuks, Mamluks. So these are actually slaves that the Islamic entities go out and buy for the purposes of fighting in the military. All right. That was the purpose of they go and get these groups of people and they put them into their army to go out there and fight. That's really one of the big picture ideas of the Mamluks. Now, the Mamluks eventually, though, could earn positions in government. They are like specially trained. They're taught how to fight. They're taught how to lead. They're taught how to take positions of government. So Mamluk is a very specific situation where you could be a slave, but in 10 or 15 years, you could eventually be a bureaucrat in government. You could be running a department in government if you were properly trained and if you had good record and good service. So that's really what you want to know about Mamluks. They eventually conquered Egypt, by the way. They took over Egypt and ruled with their own sultanate in Egypt. For hundreds of years, they controlled Egypt. Okay. So that's some of the, on top of what's in the reading, that's what you really want to focus on there. Yeah. Kirk, Monday Night Football tonight. Yep. We got the Chargers playing. I got a couple of Chargers on the fantasy football. But my opponent has Bear, the quarterback. So I think I'm going to lose. I'm only up by 20. He's probably going to score at least 40 points then. So I'm in trouble. Yes, down here, real question. John, what should we have down for Muhammad and Mecca? All right, let's start with Muhammad. Muhammad, in the notes, I had quite a few statements. He's born in 570 in the city of Mecca. And really what I would say is he's really the founder of the Islamic faith. So I think that this was a big picture ideology of what you really need to understand about Muhammad. I don't want you to know like when he first tied his own shoes, but you want to know about how he had the revelations in the cave and how he started preaching and how he went on the Hijra and how he eventually comes back and conquers Mecca and takes it over and turns the Kaaba back into a monotheistic shrine. The city of Mecca is the dominant center of the Islamic world in its early existence. and it's where Islam begins. The Kaaba, the shrine, Muhammad at the caves, the revelations, the early preaching of Muhammad there, the conquest of Mecca by Muhammad coming back from Medina. These are all things you want to know about Mecca. If I were to give you like what you might see in the matching, it might be as simple as a Western Arabian city. So all of the things that I talked about, of course, in lecture would be valuable assets to have an understanding of to get ready for, of course, the quiz tomorrow. Yeah, thanks, Daryl. Appreciate that. I missed you in class. I didn't get a chance to teach you, but I heard you're a really good student, so I want to commend you on that. Okay, I'm looking for other questions, ladies and gents. Here's a new one right here. Thank you, Alexia. On the test, are we going to have to write some rules under Sharia law? Probably not. Knowing some of the rules might help you on some of the short answer. You know, I'm not going to ask you this. I'm not going to say, hey, list some laws that under Sharia law. But if you know some of the laws, they could help you maybe go ahead and further explain or provide evidence for your answers in the content portion of the short answer. Fortunately, you lucked out. You're not going to get any SAQs on the AP part, but that would be something that could help you provide evidence or citations on the SAQ. Okay, hold on one second. The Crusades. I did already, John. I'm not sure if you heard or not, but I talked about the Crusades as being holy wars to reopen or open up access for Christians to the Christian holy sites in Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. So they're wars led by Christian Catholic entities from England, France, Germany, Italy. We're going to talk more about them in chapter 13 and 14, but for the purposes of this chapter, what you're going to really need to know would be that they're holy wars meant to open up access to the holy sites in Jerusalem. Gabby, sign of strength. What are some examples of Sharia law? So this is similar to Alexia's. Like I said, you probably won't need to write any. Some examples, though, would be, for example, like the hijab process, where women have to cover their bodies in public. Other examples will say things that are pretty extreme, like if you're a male and you catch your wife in an adulterous affair, you could have her stoned to death, or you can behead her. I mean, these, like, there's really extreme laws in there. You might benefit from reading some of these things, and so I think that those are some of the key things that I would focus on there. Men can have 4 wives was in Sharia law. Those are some of the examples that we kind of talked about in class, as just some of the examples. There's really very, very many, like what you can do in public, what you can't do in public. Can't drink alcohol, can't eat pork. These are all factors that go into play when you're talking about Sharia law. The rest of the comments look like they're talking about Monday Night Football, guys. This is almost as bad as the picture wars. Like, the boys were complaining about the picture wars, but now we're talking about Monday Night Football. So we've got to strike a balance here, ballers. Can't be complaining. I like the picture wars are funny. Okay, the picture wars are funny. All right. Any key questions, though? Any real questions that you have for me? I'm here for you. That's why I do this, is for my students. I want to make sure that you are ready for the quiz. I want you to be successful, of course. So fire away. I see up in the corner 48 ballers still on. So feel free to ask any questions that you have. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Okay, I am not seeing many questions. Volleyball girls, were you able to make it here on time? I saw Lark in here, so I know at least one volleyball player was able to make it. Was anybody else able to join? I'm hoping that I didn't go too early. I'm really hoping that everybody can participate if possible. All right, well, I'm going to move on. I don't see any questions coming in, so I'm going to move on to my final points. Gabby made it. Okay, thank you, Sign of Strength. And All right, good. Okay, girls, I can see that Ava's in, so that's a sign of strength. And we won. I watched a little bit of the JV game. Looked like we were balling out against Liggett, so that was good. Okay, final banner today before uh, we move on is going to be my final advice. And so down at the bottom here, you'll see what I want to talk about here in the end. Number one thing tonight, I was just thinking about this. Say thank you to your parents. Can you do that for me? Can you, after this is over, just go and say thank you to your parents for me? Can you just do that? Like, I'm a parent myself. I have 3 daughters. They're young. Parenting is not easy. Okay. They do a lot for you. They drive you all over the place. You're sophomores, right? Many of you, I don't think drive. So just go say thank you. Be respectful and just say thank you for everything. Be grateful for all the blessings that they've given you. The fact that you're at St. Mary's and you're able to join tonight on a live review session, I mean, it's a blessing. It's a blessing for me to be here, but I want you to always keep that in perspective. There's some kids who don't have the means that you have, and that's primarily due to your parents, to be honest with you. You're really too young to provide for yourself, so you really need to go thank your parents or your guardian, whoever it is that takes care of you. Go say thank you. Okay, when you're done with this, before you get your final studies in, before you say your prayers, go and express your gratitude and your gratefulness to your folks. Number 2, read all of your section notes carefully. There's only 3 sections. There's really no reason why you can't read them. They're pretty short. This is a pretty short chapter. You can see the review sheet's a little shorter this week. So read all of your section notes carefully. Read them 1 time, 2 times, 3 times through. Like I said, when you're going over the key terms and the key figures, the best explanations come from the notes. That's where I write my questions from. So in conjunction with the notes and the reading of the text, that's really, really where you need to be. Number 3, I would suggest watching the YouTube video lessons. If you wanted to hear my voice, if you were absent, if you want to hear me talking to you about the important concepts, put in your, what do they call those things? AirPods or whatever that you guys have. Those, back in my day, they had you had a Discman or a Walkman. Okay. It was like this big thing that you put a CD in, and then you had these cords and these big headphones. So you guys are really cool because you got these AirPod things, but pop those in. Just go ahead and listen. Like if you want to get a review, like on the way to school, listen, just listen to me talk to you. I'm going to tell you what's important on those videos. It's basically exactly what I say in lecture. I go into a little bit more detail about certain topics. I think it's really useful. That's why I made them. I spent a lot of time making them. So hopefully they will help you. Number 4, of course, study your review sheet. Do me a favor. Last time people kind of ran out of time. Get your notes organized tonight. I mean, the format. We've been doing this for about 7 or 8 weeks right now. You got the review sheet first. Then you've got your numbered and defined terms on a separate sheet, right? Then you've got section 1, 2, and 3. Organize your notes and be ready to turn those in so that we can just turn in and start the quiz. That way you have as much time as possible. And then finally, listen, I say this every week, but pray for the proper things, right? Pray for the proper things. I want to share with you, look, your family's health, number 1. We're still in the pandemic, whether you want to admit it or not, whether people believe in it or not. 700,000 people have died according to the CDC. Pray for your family's health. Pray for your health and safety. Make sure that you are praying the prayer of gratitude, like I talked about last week, saying thank you to the good Lord for all the blessings that you have, saying thank you to your parents. These are important things. Don't pray for an A+ on the quiz. In the grand scheme of life, that's not where it's at. Pray for the proper things. Do it right. Thank the good Lord. Final message today before I go back and check if there's any questions. I just want to thank you. Just want to thank you for being such kind and devoted students. For those of you who joined tonight, hey, this is going out of your way late night to get ready for a quiz. And I appreciate all your efforts. You're doing really well. You saw the average scores. The average grade in my class right now is B+, A-, which is really strong. So I just want to say that I'm appreciative of all your efforts, and I wish you success in all of your endeavors, but especially tomorrow on the quiz. Okay, going back to the comments. All right. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any more content area comments. So once again, congratulations to the volleyballers. And looks like I'm out. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you tomorrow. God bless.